So if you've spent any time online lately, you have probably heard that the Appalachian Mountains are, well, a place where people just vanish. It's given the whole region this super eerie reputation, but is there actually any truth to it? Let's get into it. Yeah, you hear stuff like this all over social media. It really sets this creepy tone, right? It suggests there's something ancient and menacing hiding just past the trees, something you definitely don't want to meet after sunset. And these warnings, they always come with a whole list of wild theories, everything from secret government projects and Bigfoot to these really sinister stories of feral, cannibalistic people. And look, while those stories are a big part of the local folklore, they can also completely overshadow the real stories of the people who have actually gone missing. So let's look past the myths for a minute.
Because when you really start to dig into it, you find that the actual science and the history behind the Appalachian Mountains are, frankly, way more compelling, and in some ways, a lot more terrifying than any myth. It really does change how you see this entire place.
To really get a handle on the Appalachians, we have to go back in time. And I mean, way back. We're talking 500 million years. That's before the dinosaurs, before Pangea even existed. Fish were just starting to appear in the oceans. This is a story that started long, long before us. And their creation story is just incredibly violent. It kicked off 500 million years ago with these huge volcanoes. Then, about 400 million years ago, tectonic plates literally slammed into each other, shooting up these enormous jagged peaks. But the real main event was 290 million years ago, when Africa crashed right into North America. This collision just shoved the mountains inland, folding and rolling them over each other, creating one of the most geologically complicated mountain ranges on the entire planet. But the story didn't stop there. For hundreds of millions of years since, the elements, wind, water, and ice, have been carving and sculpting these mountains. And that process is every bit as dramatic as their fiery birth. So let's start with the wind. So first up, wind. Let's just take Mount Washington in New Hampshire. A lot of people think of the Appalachians as these gentle, rolling hills, right? Well, this peak is home to some of the most extreme weather you can find anywhere. The climb is so brutal, people use it to train for places like Denali and even Mount Everest. The weather station at the very top has recorded temperatures as low as -47 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, to put that in perspective, that is cold enough to give you frostbite on any exposed skin in less than 5 minutes. And that's not even the worst of it. When you factor in the wind chill has been recorded at a staggering -108 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a level of cold that's almost impossible to even comprehend. And it's not just the cold. The record snowpack at the summit is 28 feet deep. That is enough to completely bury a 2-story house. The weather in these mountains is absolutely no joke. The last ice age also left a huge mark on these mountains. As the glaciers melted and retreated, all the species that loved the cold followed them up the mountainsides. But then, when the climate warmed up for good, these species got trapped on the high peaks, and they just evolved there in total isolation. This created what scientists call biological islands, totally unique ecosystems that are basically living fossils from the Ice Age, with some species you can't find anywhere else on Earth.
So this ancient, complex geology and this extreme weather all came together to create one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. But that incredible natural richness came into direct and pretty devastating conflict with human industry.
You know, it's really hard to imagine what the Appalachians were like before European settlement. We're talking towering old-growth forests, huge herds of bison and elk, and flocks of passenger pigeons so massive they would literally block out the sun for hours. But in just a few centuries, so much of that was just gone. The forests were clear-cut, species were hunted to extinction, and pollution created this toxic environment that left behind a really scarred landscape. I mean, even for the earliest and most rugged explorers, this landscape was just flat out intimidating. Daniel Boone, a guy who was famous for being a master of the wilderness, described the original mountain slopes as so wild and horrid that it is impossible to behold them without terror. The 1800s brought this huge wave of industrialization, logging, mining, that completely transformed the landscape and the lives of the people there. But when those industries collapsed, they left behind this legacy of environmental damage and economic hardship. And it was in that isolation and that struggle that the unique culture and folklore of the region were really born. Okay, so we've moved past the myths about monsters and cannibals, but that doesn't mean the mountains aren't dangerous. In fact, their reputation as the Wimpy Mountains on the other side of the country is exactly what makes them so deceptively hazardous. And that's the key question, isn't it? People look at the Appalachians and they see these smaller, older, more rounded peaks compared to the Rockies. So why do we hear so many stories about people getting into really serious trouble here? Well, this is where the numbers tell the real story. The Appalachian Trail is actually about 450 miles shorter than the Pacific Crest Trail out west, but it takes the average hiker way longer to finish. Why? Because the terrain is so much more rugged and challenging, with these constant, brutal ups and downs that just grind down even the most experienced hikers. So people vanish for very real, tangible reasons. The terrain is incredibly steep, it's relentlessly overgrown, and it's just brutally difficult to navigate. The weather can turn on a dime, going from sunny to life-threatening in minutes. And if you do get lost or injured, that thick forest canopy makes it almost impossible for search helicopters or planes to ever spot you from the air. This is a landscape that is still very much alive and changing. It continues to face some really serious modern threats, but at the exact same time, it's showing these incredible signs of resilience and hope for the future. The Appalachians are still facing huge threats. Things like mountaintop removal mining have literally reshaped the land. Fracking for natural gas is a major risk to the region's water supply. And of course, as the climate changes, those unique biological islands are at risk because they've got nowhere left to go as temperatures keep rising. But it is not all bad news, not at all. Thanks to serious conservation efforts, the forests are actually starting to recover, and with them, the wildlife is coming back. Moose, bald eagles, and bears are returning to their historic homes, and the successful reintroduction of elk is just proof of the resilience of this incredible ecosystem. And that's really why all this matters. Because despite everything, the Appalachians are still home to some of the most biodiverse and rare ecosystems on the entire planet. And learning about their past and their real dangers helps us appreciate their profound beauty and just how important they are. In the end, it might be helpful to think of these mountains not just as a place, but as a process, a half-billion-year-old story that is still being written every single day. They are one of the planet's longest-running projects, and they are ancient, dangerous, and unbelievably beautiful.